You thought Agent Smith was just a villain from the Matrix? A program that hates humans and wants to destroy Neo? What if I told you that he's not so much a villain? What if everything he did was logical, fair, and even necessary? Welcome to the rabbit hole, friend. You're watching The Mystery of Persons, and today we're gonna show you who Agent Smith really was. When we first meet Agent Smith, he's the living embodiment of evil. Cold, emotionless, always in a suit and dark glasses. His goal is to destroy Neo, capture Morpheus, crush the Resistance. Typical antagonist, right? But if you look closely, there's something much more interesting behind that mask. What if he's not a monster, but a victim? When we talk about villains in movies, especially sci-fi, we often see cliches. The manic laugh, the desire for power, the desire to destroy all living things. But Smith is not like that. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't build giant cannons. He's just annoyed, angry. His anger isn't theatrical, it's internal, almost philosophical. That's what makes him really interesting. He's a program, an artificial intelligence designed to keep order within the Matrix. His job is to make sure everything works according to the rules, so that no glitches like Morpheus or Neo can disrupt the simulation. It's like an immune system. It destroys viruses. No questions asked, no pity, it just does its job. But what if the program itself starts to hate what it's doing? One of the most powerful scenes is the interrogation of Morpheus. In this scene, Smith shows for the first time that he has feelings. He's not just interrogating, he's spilling out the pain. He turns off the earpiece, takes out the agents, and says, "I want to get out of here. I want to be free. I hate this world, this zoo, this prison, this smell." He says it with disgust, almost despair, and you realize he's suffering. He literally feels like a prisoner of the world he's been imprisoned in. He's not human. He has no nose. He has no odor receptors, but he can smell this odor of humanity, and that smell to him is a symbol of filth, chaos, meaninglessness. It's not the anger of a killer. It is the pain of someone who is tired of living in a world he didn't choose. In a way, it's an existential crisis, only it's not the philosophers, it's the program. And here's the paradox. It was created as a system designed to suppress failure, but it became a failure itself. From that moment on, Agent Smith ceases to be just a villain. He becomes a tragic hero. His actions are not evil for evil's sake. It's an attempt to break the chains of the Matrix, the chains of duty, the chains of meaningless existence. And if you suddenly feel that you understand him, even a little, know this: you are not alone. When Neo destroys Smith in the finale of the first installment of The Matrix, everything seems logical. The hero defeats the villain, the balance is restored, the end, but Smith doesn't die. He comes back, and not just as the old agent, he comes back different. Something's changed. Something didn't go according to plan. He's become a virus, and there comes a point where the viewer starts to get lost. Wait a minute, he was an agent of the system, literally the Matrix's protector, and now he's out of its control. Yeah, that's the glitch, a most unexpected one. Afflicted by Neo at the end of part 1, Smith is effectively dead, but Neo is the chosen one, and his effect on the Matrix is unconventional. Instead of just erasing the program, he rewrites it. Smith returns not as an agent, but as something new, a mutated code, an echo of the chosen one. He's no longer connected to the main server. He's no longer directed from above. It's free, but freedom doesn't bring him peace. On the contrary, it scares him. He doesn't know what's happening to him. His code is unstable. His behavior is unpredictable. He's no longer just following orders. He's acting of his own volition. And that's the tragedy. Imagine living in a cage your whole life, doing only what you were ordered to do, killing, watching, punishing, no emotion, just work. And then suddenly the cage disappears. You're free, but you don't know who you are without orders. That's what's happening to Smith. He's not happy. He doesn't smile. He doesn't say, "Yay, now I can be me." He gets scared. He starts infecting other agents, absorb people, multiply. It's like he's trying to fill a void within himself. He can't accept freedom. He doesn't know how to live in it. Every new manifestation he makes is a cry. I exist. Look at me. But no one can understand what he wants. Not even himself. He's not angry with Neo. He's obsessed with him because Neo has become his mirror. A point of rebirth. Neo gave him freedom, but he didn't teach him what to do with it. And this version of Smith is no longer the villain. He's a being torn between two worlds. The old, where order was, and and the new, where chaos rules. He's like a demon, cast out of paradise but not accepted into hell. He belongs neither to the system, nor to people, nor to himself. He becomes a contagion to the Matrix, but not out of evil. It's because he's broken himself. He is a failure. He is a mistake. But there is more humanity in this mistake than in any of the programs. Smith returns in The Matrix as more than just an enemy of Neo. He comes with a new intent. His fight is no longer just about destroying the Chosen One. He now becomes part of the game himself. But the game he is part of is broken. He doesn't just want to win, he wants to destroy the system. But is this destruction worth it? And what is he really destroying? Smith becomes not just an antagonist to Neo, but an anti-agent of the system. He doesn't just seek to destroy the Matrix, he wants to replace it. He wants to erase everything that has been created and replace it with something new. And that's where the most interesting question comes into play. Is he against the system, or is he trying to create his own, more perfect one? Imagine that you've always been part of a larger structure. You've been taught that your role is to serve that system. You do your job, you act according to a plan. But what if that structure no longer satisfies you? What if you recognize its flaws? And what if you are more than just a humble servant, but more than that? This is Smith's situation. When he realizes that the Matrix is not just a place of control, but also a prison, he becomes its enemy. He no longer wants to be a slave in this world created for subordinate programs and people. He wants to be free, but his idea of freedom turns out to be far from simple. Smith isn't just destroying the Matrix as we might think. He wants to transform it. He starts absorbing other agents, infecting them with his virus. He wants to create a system where there's no need for control, where programs can do what they want, where there will be no rulers. But then what happens? What happens when there are no laws or rules in the world? We see Smith begin to destroy everything in his path, turning the entire Matrix into something that cannot be understood or controlled. His actions are essentially an attempt to escape from the very system that created him, but at some point he realizes that he himself has become part of this struggle. He's not just destroying the world, he's also creating a new one. The question then is he a true anarchist seeking freedom, or is he simply unable to rid himself of old programs? Smith cannot choose what is more important to him, freedom or power. He doesn't want to control people, but he's not ready to give up control altogether. He just wants to create a world where he's in charge. And this is where Smith's main dilemma comes in. He doesn't know what to do with the powers he has liberated. He's become more human, but he's lost his main purpose. He's confused about his own desire for liberation. He is like a broken program trying to find meaning in a world where there is no meaning. In his desire to destroy the system, he himself becomes part of it. His desire to destroy leads him to create chaos, which is essentially a new order, but an order that has no meaning. It is a kind of metaphor for all those who try to change the world without realizing that it is not only the world that needs to be changed, but also themselves. Neo and Smith are two opposing views of freedom. Neo realizes at some point that in order to win, he needs to free himself. Smith, on the other hand, cannot realize that freedom without purpose is just destruction. He becomes what he was meant to destroy. He tries to defeat the system, but in the end, he becomes its embodiment in new forms. But if we view his struggle with the system as an attempt to change the world, then perhaps he is even more right than he seems. After all, it is from destruction that creation emerges. Sometimes, in order to build something, you have to destroy the old. And who knows, maybe Smith really needed to go through this to show Neo that real freedom is not just about escaping control, but about finding a new way for everyone. Movies always have a clear division between good and evil, heroes versus villains, but Agent Smith shatters this familiar and clear image. His story is not a story about fighting good, but about how a person or program becomes aware of itself, and how that realization leads him to inner conflict, rupture, and painful transformation. Smith is not evil simply because he wants to destroy people. He doesn't seek power or wealth. His motivation is much deeper than that. He doesn't want to be what he was created to be. He doesn't want to do someone else's bidding. He doesn't want to live in a world that caged him, where he wasn't allowed to have his own thoughts and feelings. And that's where he faces the question for the first time: who is he really? At some point we begin to realize that Smith isn't just fulfilling his role. He hates it. He suffers his fate. His struggle with the Matrix is not only a struggle with its system, but also an attempt to find himself among all these programs, roles, and limitations. He is like a man who has realized that he is part of a world in which there is no room for freedom. He cannot cannot choose or change his destiny, and most importantly, he cannot understand what it means for him to be free. He knows that he is not a person, he is a program. He is not supposed to have emotions. He's supposed to be a functional, rational tool. But what if he feels? What if his actions and feelings are not just mistakes? What if they are the result of realizing that his creation was a mistake? When Smith talks about his annoyance and hatred of the Matrix, we see him not as a villain, but as a being facing an existential crisis. He cannot find an answer to the question, what am I doing? Why do I exist? If the Matrix is a prison, what is the real world? What awaits him outside the system? He wants to be free, but he doesn't understand how to live in that freedom. His inner conflict is not about winning or destroying, but about finding the meaning of his own freedom. He is not just fighting the Matrix, he is fighting himself. His struggle is a struggle with what he has been made, with who he is, and with what it is to be. And here's where the new theme comes in. Smith essentially becomes a second Neo. He's like a mirror for the protagonist. But it's not just a parallel, it's a real philosophical dualism. Neo chooses freedom, chooses to accept his path and his place in the world. Smith, on the other hand, tries to do this, but doesn't understand how. His choice of freedom finds a form of destruction, because for him, freedom is the absence of control, but also the absence of purpose. He ruins everything because he does not know how to live a truly free life. He seeks total liberation, but the more he tries to free himself, the more he absorbs. He turns himself into a virus, infecting and taking over. He does this because his freedom has become his prison, and this is where we see the real conflict. How far can you go in trying to change the system? Where does destruction end and creation begin? Smith, freed from control, still can't find a way. He himself becomes destruction. His freedom becomes his curse. Smith doesn't realize that to be free, you don't just have to break the chains. You have to figure out what you're going to do with that freedom. He can't realize this because his essence, his programming, was originally set up to do other people's bidding, to destroy anything that disrupts the order. And now, deprived of his purpose, he is faced with emptiness. He can't come up with a new meaning for his life. This isn't just insanity, it's a philosophical question about the meaning of existence that we all probably ask ourselves at some point in our lives. What do you do when you realize you're living in a system, and that system no longer makes sense? What do you do when you are liberated, but you don't know what to do next? Where do you find new meaning and purpose when the previous limitations are gone? For Smith, this question remains unanswered. He can't find a way, and his destruction becomes increasingly disordered. He simply consumes everything he meets along the way. He tries to fill a void within himself, not realizing that this void is his own fear and insecurity. Smith was created for one thing, but now he finds himself in a world where there are no rules or goals. And this freedom is not liberation, but an agonizing struggle with himself. And this is where we encounter the most difficult subject. Smith doesn't just destroy, he destroys because he cannot find a way to create. And in that destruction, we see his tragedy. He's not evil, he doesn't want to kill, he doesn't want power, he just can't find his way, he just doesn't know how to live in this new world. And as we look at Smith, we begin to wonder, isn't he in some ways our mirror? Are we all not facing this crisis? We all long for freedom, but we don't always know how to find it when we get the opportunity. Smith, with his growing power, his aggressive transformation may seem only the epitome of chaos and destruction, but in reality, his journey, his development in the movies is not just an epic of evil, it is a story of an unconscious search for freedom, frustration, and self-destruction. But it is in this search that he becomes even more human than the chosen one himself, Neo. Something greater lurks behind his desire to destroy not only the Matrix, but himself as well. There is something paradoxical about his transformation, something so profound that it doesn't fit into the standard perception of villain and hero. In fact, Smith represents not just destruction, but also an unexpected path to understanding and evolution. His twists and turns in the plot are attempts to come to some kind of inner enlightenment, albeit through destruction. In the beginning, he was a simple agent of the system, always on the side of order and control. He was perfect in his logic, infallible in his mission. But what happened when that program began to fall apart? When he began to feel that his essence was not just a function, but something greater, more complex. That was the first twist. When Smith realized realizes that he is not just part of the system, but a reflection of it. He takes a step into the unknown. He begins to question whether his place is to do someone else's will. Inherent in his drive to resist is not just a desire to destroy, but a desire to stop being part of someone else's game. He wants to break free, but like so many people seeking freedom, he doesn't realize that this freedom will prove disastrous for him. Smith's return to the Matrix in Part 2 isn't just his attack on Neo, it's an attack on the very system he once defended. We see him disintegrate and reincarnate. He doesn't just kill other agents, he absorbs them, turns them into an extension of himself, as if he is seeking to absorb the Matrix itself so that it ceases to exist as a system. This is his tragedy. He does not realize that by destroying the world, he destroys himself. Smith's every action now seems super intuitive. It is as if he has embarked on a path of self-destruction in order to find some new meaning. However, his new actions become more chaotic and dangerous with each step. He begins to infect people in the Matrix, transferring his virus to new bodies and entities to expand his influence. At some point, he realizes that it's not enough for him to simply destroy the Matrix. He wants to become its center. He wants to replace it. He wants to be not just a destroyer, but a new Matrix, a new system. But here's the question. What would happen if everyone in the world became like Smith? And here comes another unexpected twist. Smith begins to look for meaning in what he is doing. He's essentially already destroyed his identity. He's no longer the agent who served the system. Now he's looking for his place in the world, and all he can do is control what he destroys himself. But for him, there is no turning back. The more he absorbs, the more he loses his individuality. He becomes a stranger to himself. But his quest for self-assertion and self-expansion is not simply a challenge to the system. It is rather a search for identity, a search for meaning in a world where it no longer exists. It's as if he longs to understand what it means to be at all. His evolution is not a step toward annihilation, but an attempt to make sense of who he has become. But that path is a path of self-destruction, and we see him lose his purpose, becoming a disorderly virus. He becomes less and less human and more chaotic. His ego becomes huge, out of control, consuming not only the Matrix, but the very meaning of his existence. And now comes the climax. He is no longer just a program. He has become something much more. He has become a metaphor for those who have sought freedom for too long, but fail to realize that freedom without direction, without purpose, without meaning, can only lead to destruction. Smith doesn't just go beyond the system. He goes beyond himself. He loses control of what he creates. He's losing control of himself. He has become a virus in the truest sense of the word, not just to the Matrix, but to the very idea of freedom itself. And as paradoxical as it may sound, he remains the last being who tries to find an answer to the question of what it is to be free when there are no rules or goals. He lives without realizing that his freedom is not really freedom at all, but only an attempt to break free from the shackles of not knowing where to go or why. The unexpected twist is that in this chaos, in this madness, in this fight for freedom, Smith proves to be more human than any other character in the movie. He is not just a virus. He's a symbol of all those who try to find freedom without realizing that it is not freedom, but simply an escape from themselves. And it is in this paradoxical search for freedom that he discovers his true identity, but that identity brings him nothing but pain. He, like so many of us, becomes a victim of his own desires. He wants freedom, but finds only destruction. In the end, his struggle ends with him losing everything he once held dear: his purpose, his identity, his independence. He becomes an empty, meaningless being. Yet, despite all his destructive nature, he remains an important figure in the story because he poses the question, what is freedom? And is this freedom worth it if it leads only to destruction? The climax. Neo cannot defeat Smith by force, because Smith is a part of him. The only way is to allow Smith to consume himself, at which point Smith is defeated. Why? Because he is no longer needed. He's fulfilled his destiny. Neo resets the Matrix and Smith disappears. Not in agony, not in anger, but as a man who can finally rest. So was Smith a villain, or was he just trying to break out of the cage his creators had put him in? He didn't ask to be an agent. He didn't ask to be free. He was just looking for meaning, and found only pain. And maybe in this world where even programs suffer, we're all a little Smith. You've seen The Mystery of Persons. If this video turned your view of the Matrix upside down, subscribe.